Born with the surname Cable on May 8, 2511, Jerome was native to the planet Minister, an inner human colony with a notoriously violent region known as the Palaikos Borderlands. This region was home to the impoverished Cable family. Life in the Borderlands promoted criminal behavior in the young Jerome, and before the age of 10, he was set on a grim trajectory. Thanks to the Office of Naval Intelligence Section 3, however, Jerome was conscripted into the Spartan-II program on or within a year from his 6th birthday. His surname was discarded, and he became Jerome 092. At first, he was eager to remove himself from the program, although he never successfully escaped. In time, he came to realize his aptitude in leading other trainees, and his thoughts of self-preservation moved aside for the welfare of his teammates. Like all Spartan-IIs, Jerome was rigorously trained and thoroughly indoctrinated to prepare him for the implementation of Project Aster. The project began and ended in March of 2525, during which the Spartans were physically and chemically augmented. However, Jerome's body rejected the procedures and he washed out of the program, possibly dying in the process. Though the details of his rehabilitation have not yet been disclosed, Jerome was salvaged along with 2 other washouts, all of whom were eventually able to don Mjolnir-powered exosuits. Together, they became a static variant of Red Team. They were used across various campaigns in the early days of the Human Covenant conflict, and Jerome cemented his position as Red Leader through these initial battles. In February 2531, Red Team was instrumental in the evacuation of civilians from Perth City on the human colony Arcadia. The planet was not merely another target for glassing, at least initially. The fleet of Glorious Interdiction was the first Covenant fleet to discover Arcadia because it had been directed there by coordinates from a Forerunner relic on another colony, Harvest, and its forces were eager to discover more artifacts. Why Jerome and the others were on Arcadia prior to this conflict remains unknown. There had been insurrectionist activity on the planet in the previous decade, but ODSTs had subdued that uprising. It is possible that there were still rebel elements in the colony, but this is only speculation. After a short battle for control of Forerunner ruins within one of Arcadia's jungles, the Covenant were dislodged from their fortified dome surrounding the remnant of Forerunner presence. Between the evacuation of civilians and the fight for access to the ruins, Red Team had coordinated with the ground forces of a recently arrived Spirit of Fire. They had been driven into the outskirts of Perth City after the evacuation of civilians had concluded, and were obliged to hold out against encroaching Covenant warriors until the advent of Spartan Team Omega. Professor Ellen Anders was kidnapped by Ripa Morami while exploring the ruins in the jungle, but Red Team was able to recover Sergeant John Forge and return with him to the Spirit of Fire. Working without any apparent supervision, Red Team made the decision to voyage with the crew in pursuit of Anders. Jerome, and later Douglas, suggested that the Covenant destroyer holding the Professor should be destroyed to prevent classified intel from leaking to the Covenant. Sergeant Forge was incensed by this suggestion. The Spirit of Fire followed Anders to Shield 0459, the Etrin Harborage. Red Team was deployed to the surface along with other reconnaissance personnel. Here, Jerome, Alice, and Douglas became the first 3 Spartans to interact with and battle the Flood parasite. The human forces managed to repel the Flood until the Spirit of Fire ordered an evacuation of all units. After the evacuation had been completed, the human vessel was ingested into a decontamination pathway linking the surface of the Etrin Harborage to its inner Dyson sphere. Ostensibly cleansed after a rigorous journey, the Phoenix-class ship arrived inside the sphere with little time to spare before its next engagement. A Covenant heavy destroyer was approaching on an intercept course. Spartans have been known to dislike ship-to-ship warfare. The reason is that within a starship's hull, they are typically unable to affect the battle, and may be vaporized without warning. The encounter between the CPV-class heavy destroyer Proclamation's Tithe and the UNSC Spirit of Fire was perhaps jarring for the Spartans at first, but Jerome, Alice, and Douglas were no doubt thrilled to participate in the ensuing battle against Covenant forces. While Cyclops exoskeletons repaired external damage to the ship's power core after the Spirit of Fire and Proclamation's Tithe had collided, Red Team and other Spirit forces fought off invading Covenant units. Once the core became operational again, the Spirit of Fire was able to escape the battle and establish a beachhead on the inner surface of the Etrin Harborage. Red Team was instrumental in these actions. Ellen Anders persuaded James Cutter, captain of the Spirit of Fire, to use their slipspace drive as a bomb to destroy everything within and without the Dyson Sphere, including a fleet of Forerunner dreadnoughts that the Professor had involuntarily activated. Red Team served in the escort for the slipspace drive and provided the final line of defense against a wave of honor guard Sanghili, although Sergeant Forge dispatched the Arbiter Ripa Murami. Unfortunately, the core had become unstable by the time the fight had concluded, meaning that manual alignment was required to trigger the explosion. Jerome volunteered for this, but Sergeant John Forge ordered him to report back to the Spirit of Fire with his teammates, opting to sacrifice himself instead. Jerome acknowledged the honor of having served with Forge, and departed. He and the other Spartans helped the Spirit evacuate its forces from inside the Etran harborage, and escaped with the ship as it fled the imminent cataclysm. Left drifting with no way to rapidly traverse the vastness of space, Red Team went into cryosleep in March of 2531 to await rescue. On January 4th, 2537, Jerome was defrosted during a nascent flood outbreak within the halls of the ship. He fought multiple combat forms while attempting to eliminate the pod infectors, and despite irregular behavior from the rapidly deteriorating AI Serena, he survived the experience. Serena was ultimately responsible for cleansing the ship of remaining flood forms, and Jerome returned to stasis after being reassured by Professor Anders that they were no longer endangered by the flood. Fast forward 22 years, and the Spirit of Fire had been completely displaced from the Milky Way galaxy. The captain and crew awoke to find themselves above Installation 00, the Lesser Ark. Jerome and Red Team were dispatched to the surface to investigate a distress call, and after encountering makeshift barricades and strange technology linked to Forerunner devices, they entered the Henry Lamb Research Outpost. Inside, they met the frantic AI Isabel, a logistics intelligence who was confused by their inquiries about Covenant presence on the installation. She begged them to leave with her, but Jerome and the others decided to investigate several loud clangs that came from deeper within the outpost. The three Spartans were ambushed upon entering the next room, unable to react fast enough to the physical presence of Atriox. Douglas was severely wounded, forcing Jerome and Alice to drag and then carry him with them as they retreated. The banished hordes revealed themselves as they prepared to overrun Red Team, prompting Jerome to request danger-close archer missiles from the Spirit of Fire, which he received. When they arrived at a designated evac point, Jerome, Douglas, and Isabel were picked up by a Pelican dropship, but Alice stayed behind to employ guerrilla tactics against their new enemy. Jerome brought Isabel to Captain Cutter on the bridge, where she sulked and then debriefed them on the Banished. Although Isabel implored them to run away, Cutter resolved to stay and fight the Banished, inspiring everyone in the process. Jerome was assigned to lead the first organized attack on the Banished hierarchy. Spirit ground forces targeted one of their supply operations to draw out the warlord Decimus. They swiftly achieved their goal, resulting in Decimus's temporary defeat and the discovery of a new location that demanded the attention of the UNSC forces. Jerome led the next assault, with the objective of capturing 3 pylons connected to a cartographer's site elevator. With Jerome's successful domination of the Banished units contesting the pylons, Anders gained control of the elevator, allowing Spirit ground forces to proceed to the cartographer. Here, they were pitted against Banished and Sentinel defenders, and ultimately fought their way through both. The cartographer enabled Anders to discover the Banished's portal network, which was being used to transport the Splinter faction's units and supplies throughout the entire installation. Jerome and a recovered Douglas were then allocated to the objective of permanently shutting down the portal network. Despite a vulgar display of power from the assault carrier Enduring Conviction, the Spartans and UNSC ground forces were able to destroy vital relay nodes in the network. After locating and destroying the portal controller, the UNSC forces were re-engaged by Decimus, who was killed in the ensuing battle. Jerome was then immediately recalled to the Spirit of Fire for reassignment. Isabel had devised a plan to paralyze and then obliterate the Enduring Conviction through the use of a Forerunner particle cannon and a small boarding party. Isabel would go with Jerome to board the carrier, while Douglas would be ordered to defend the particle cannon against the Banished counterattack, and Alice would be on site to help Jerome if needed. Jerome's Pelican crashed on its initial approach, but he left unscathed with Isabel and was able to continue moving towards the gravity lift connecting the carrier to the Ark's surface. Douglas successfully thwarted the Banished counterattack, giving the particle cannon enough time to fully strip the Enduring Conviction's energy shields while it held the vessel in place. Alice, through the use of Kodiak artillery platforms, removed the ground defenses that would have prevented Jerome from entering the gravity lift. Once aboard the assault carrier, Jerome cut down all personnel that he encountered and uploaded Isabel into the carrier's control systems. From here, she was able to use the ventral cleansing beam to wipe out Banished encampments below and damage the surface of the Ark, triggering a sentinel response. Countless aggressor sentinels began to ram the hull with their bodies, until they had weakened its structural integrity enough to sever the ship. With the Banished's deadliest tool out of commission, Jerome retrieved Isabel and jumped from the exposed deck down through hurtling debris. At the same time, the recently finished Installation 09, a replacement Halo for the ring destroyed by John 117 at the end of the first Ark conflict, became accessible to UNSC and Banished forces alike. Jerome reunited with the other members of Red Team on the ring, and together they fought against the Banished forces attempting to take over the Halo. While working for Professor Anders, Red Team encountered a Retriever Sentinel, and were forced to either avoid it or inflict enough damage to cause a temporary retreat. Red Team and the SOF forces under their command were required to capture and hold control towers. These would allow Anders to direct the Retriever. Once she had mastery of the Sentinel, she used it to deactivate a shield barrier that was restricting UNSC forces from reaching the installation's control room. Professor Anders entered the control room by herself, while Jerome, Alice, Douglas, and the other Spirit of Fire units were tasked with defending her while she prepared the Halo for departure. Atriox deployed all of his available forces in an effort to dominate the ring, but not even 3 Scarabs were enough to overwhelm the determination of the Spartans and the Marines. Anders ejected the remaining Banished troops upon gaining control of the installation, and after Jerome and the others had evacuated, departed for the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy. Jerome was later promoted to the rank of Expeditionary Force Commander, as detailed in the following Phoenix log. With the authority granted to him as the ranking Navy and UEG official in a designated administrative region, Captain Cutter has conferred Jerome 092 the acting rank of Commander. The rank itself is a formality, but one insisted on by Isabel to better align the ship's ad hoc command structure with the letter of UNSC regulations. Jerome's combat acumen has merited not only formal recognition, but also practical upgrades to his arsenal, namely the Command Mantis. This enhanced variant of the Mantis Walker possesses laser weaponry and better shielding than its baseline counterpart, although his own classification was derived from the ancient Greek city-state Sparta. Jerome dubbed his Mantis Theseus, after the greatest hero of Athens. As of 2559, it serves as a mobile command post and linebreaker unit that complements both his augmented physiology and leadership style. It incorporates one of the Spirit of Fire's command and control Nexus relays, enhancing Jerome's situational awareness of the battlefield and serving as a backup for the UNSC BattleNet should the ship be crippled or destroyed. Jerome's character is not composed entirely of bravery and battlefield proficiency. It has also fealty and distinct compassion. Despite the fact that he was ready to sacrifice Professor Anders during the battle for Arcadia, Jerome became fond of the Spirit of Fire crew as they worked and fought alongside one another, and by the time of the Second Ark conflict, his loyalty to them was evident. He has become an indispensable member of the SOF crew, and his activity on the Ark is a critical bulwark against the Banished. Hello there. I hope you've enjoyed this character history Redux as much as I've enjoyed crafting it. Feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy my content. If there's a character, event, or species in the Halo or Lord of the Rings universe that you'd like to see featured on my channel, let me know in a comment down below. I hope to see you again, but until then,